but there is opportunity for you to make comments and ask questions and things like that in the chat. And we will have a question and answer session at the end of the day or of the hour or so. We were going to try and live stream onto Facebook, but we had a bit of a tech issue. So unfortunately, that's not going to happen. But we have all of you, so that's fine. So what we're going to do is, first of all, we're going to hear from Rena Gaborov, who is in Goongerah, and also from Isaac, who was one of the people that was instrumental in the campaign this summer at the Errinundra camp. And we're going to talk a little bit about why it's important to be activists on forests at the moment. And we're also at the end going to be launching a film, and then stick around to find out how you can get involved to help us protect these forests. There's a whole bunch of things that we have for people to do. So I'm going to start a little bit and tell you about GECO. I can recognise quite a few faces there, so I know this won't be news to all of you, but I'll give you some background anyway for people that may not be as aware. So GECO stands for the Goongerah Environment Centre. I have my merch on. You can buy some of that online if you want to. We started in 1993. And we are a volunteer direct action collective based in East Gippsland. So for a long time, we've been doing non-violent direct action to protect forests. A lot of us have been involved for a long time. We don't have any government funding, and we've had a really strong commitment to working with local communities, including the Bidwell communities, who are the traditional owners of the land. Probably we're most well known for the long-term blockade that we had at Goongerah, which was a 5-year, at the time it was Australia's longest running forest blockade. And we've had a whole bunch of really successful direct action over that time, which has resulted in areas being protected from logging. And that's also been in conjunction with citizen science and with legal challenges and with lobbying politicians. So because of all of the work of those volunteers and a lot of you here today, we've managed to get lots of hectares of forest protected in reserves. And that's been because of the hard work of all of people over 25 odd years. You probably know that logging in East Gippsland is mainly for the export wood chipping industry. So 80 to 90% of it gets exported overseas via the Eden chip mill and via the Geelong chip mill. And it's all for basically all low value pulp and paper products. So there's no real economic value in this industry, and it's heavily subsidised by the taxpayer. Vic Forest is the government owned logging company, and it makes a loss of millions of dollars every year. So there's absolutely no reason to be continuing this destructive practice. Some of you who may remember that in the end of 2019, the Victorian government made a big announcement about ending old growth logging, and also protecting some areas which they called interim protected areas into the reserve system, and that included places like Quark, which we've been campaigning for. And it also announced that they would be phasing out the native timber industry in 2030. We thought that was a good thing at the time. However, a couple of months after that happened, a catastrophic bushfire ripped through the entire area, and you'll see some of that in the film that we'll be showing later. And that means that most of the areas that were added to the reserve, and most of the forest estate more broadly, was burnt overnight. And there's only a very few small patches of forest that's left that's unburnt. And that's the focus. That's been the focus of our campaign up on the Errinundra Plateau over the last 12 months or so. They also kept logging old growth forests because they just changed the way they define it. And so there's still big old trees scheduled for logging. Someone the other day found a 14-metre around tree that's in a scheduled logging coop. And although they say they don't log it, it's just all about the definitions. And they're also logging endangered species habitat, which Rena will be talking a little bit about in a minute. So they've also been logging the stuff that has been burnt, salvage logging and really, really damaging logging, and some incredible destructive practices under the guise of forest fire management, including knocking over every tree that they consider dangerous, which is just about every big tree, and bulldozing the sides of tracks all over the place behind closed doors. So basically, in this far corner of Victoria, there's a whole bunch of really terrible forest practices going on that pays absolutely no mind to the fire that's come through, the 30 odd years of logging. While COVID's been going on, this has all been happening without anyone being really able to monitor it, apart from a small group of volunteers that are up in East Gippsland. That's probably it for me. I'm now going to hand over to Rena. So Rena is a local wildlife carer. She's got the Wallaby Wildlife Sanctuary. She's actually got a little kangaroo with her right now, but she won't put him on screen, unfortunately. And she's an incredible field ecologist. She's like a frog whisperer. She discovered this frog that everyone thought was extinct just by walking down a track in the dark and just somehow managing to hear it in a puddle. So she also discovered one of Victoria's fattest trees, which is now in the National Park and part of a old growth walk up on the plateau. So we're really stoked to have her today talking a little bit about why this area is really important to protect and some of the ecological values. So she's going to start screen sharing. Hopefully that works. Everyone can give us a thumbs up if they can see it. Yeah?
How's that?
Almost. Coming. I don't know about you guys, but I can't see the screen. Can you guys see it? Head nodding.
I'll just try it again.
Hey, oh, go there for a second.
Oh, okay. I'll just go on again. We just rehearsed this and it worked fine. Quite typical. Okay. How's that?
Yeah, I can see it now. Yeah?
Okay, I'll go on to a slideshow. Hello, thank you for that very generous introduction, Fiona. So I'm just going to give a quick chat about a bit of the ecology in East Gippsland, focusing on our forests and what we have been campaigning on. So there is a lot of threatened species in East Gippsland. Most of Victoria's actually reside in this part of the state. And there's a few things, and mostly the things we've been campaigning on in scheduled logging coops. But first of all, I've got this old Google map up here, and I just wanted to, I don't know who's in the room who's been here and who hasn't. So I just wanted to show you in Victoria where East Gippsland is. So if you can see my pointer and you see Bairnsdale, and you draw a line over to where the Murray River kind of starts around there, that little bit of the state is East Gippsland. So that's got a majority of threatened species, and that's the forest that we're focusing on. And 1.3 million hectares of it was burnt in the Black Summer Fire. So we've lost a lot of our species. So the first one I'm going to talk about is rainforest. There's plenty of different rainforest communities in East Gippsland. All rainforest is threatened, both federally and on a state level. And East Gippsland's kind of special in the way, if you saw where it was located in Victoria just then, we've got influences coming from the Pacific Ocean that's warm. So we get that warm New South Wales influence coming in from the east, but then we also get that southern influence from Antarctica coming up, and we've also got hills. So we get these types of rainforests that cross over, the warm and cool temperate, and it creates this crossover rainforest. Here is some now. Unfortunately, I think, so crossover rainforest was never actually kind of defined. So when you would find it in areas, you would have to define either cool temperate or warm temperate There's special definitions in forest legislation for coops, and they give it buffers. You're not supposed to log rainforest, but the area around it protects it from not being burnt. So if you look at this picture, you can see different aged forest in the sort of outer peripheries. This area is actually mixed cool temperate, warm temperate rainforest, but it doesn't exist now because it was burnt. So unfortunately, over 70% of our warm temperate rainforest in East Gippsland was burnt in the last 2019-20 fires. Less cool temperate was burnt, but still a significant amount. Unfortunately, it's unknown whether those rainforests will come back because they get encroached by eucalypt, they get reburnt. The 2009 fires in the Central Highlands for their cool temperate isn't looking very good at the moment. Anyway, so what we do when there's scheduled logging coops is one of the things we do is we go and look for this rainforest within the coop, because although you would think such an important ecosystem is known about, it actually not all of it's mapped. And so often you will go into an area where it's being logged and you'll find a pocket of rainforest that wasn't known about. So if it's not picked up, it gets logged, and it has in the past. And so this picture here is cool temperate rainforest that's found up higher, and that's most of the rainforest that's left on the Errinundra Plateau, which is one of the biggest areas of forests that we have left unburnt. These species here, these tiny thin tree ferns, you can stick your hand around them and they're very tall. They're Guanduanik Relics. There was a few hundred recorded in East Gippsland before the fires. There's probably just a handful now. I don't think it's been documented how many have been left. Most of the areas have been burnt where they occurred, but there are a couple of areas that weren't burnt. And this is another special type of rainforest that's found up high. It's called cool temperate mixed forest. And the reason why it's mixed is because it's got these eucalypts sticking out of it. And what it is the area's been unburnt for so long that the rainforest is actually overtaking the eucalypts. Up in Northern Australia, that's actually a problem in rainforest. But here it's very, very rare. It takes a long time for cool temperate rainforest to form. And this area where this was taken, near some bogs that have been cored, there's no charcoal in a 8,000 year old core, so it doesn't see fire. So we'll just go, so that's just one of the communities that we look for when we're searching through scheduled logging coops. I'll just go through some of the animals. This is the greater glider. Greater gliders are found down the east coast of Australia, but it was only this year that they worked out they were actually 3 subspecies, not just 2. And in Victoria, we have the southern greater glider, and it has a few different behaviours that aren't in the others, such as it doesn't like warm temperatures. The greater glider is probably one of the main species of concern at the moment. It used to be very, very common, found in the forest where it occurred. And in 2015-16, it got listed federally. Then in 2017, it also got listed in the state as vulnerable. And now it's getting listed as endangered. So it's declining, declining, declining. It loves old forest and big old hollows, and it's threatened by the loss of these as well as by climate change. So you can see how it's very affected by logging. You would think that you would just not log the habitat, especially considering it's old trees that are rare now in our burnt landscape across Victoria, but that is actually not the case. So we go looking for these gliders, and there used to be prescriptions for them. However, those goalposts change often. Just going into a bit more detail for that, we currently have a coop that we were told in 2019 that there were so many gliders in there that they were going to protect the area. We have that in writing from DELP, and that coop is now scheduled to be logged in December with no protection. And another species is our large forest owls that we have in East Gippsland, all rare species. This is the powerful owl. Powerful owls need graded gliders to eat. They also, this is a mast owl, they also need old forest and big hollows. So although, oh, my sooty owl, you can get powerful owls in places like Melbourne because there's lots of ring-tailed possums. Powerful owls have moved into urban areas. That's excellent for powerful owls, but in the forest, if they're going to live in forest environments where they are from, they need hollows. So they're actually, like many possums, they're actually harder to find in the forest than they are in urban areas. This is the large brown tree frog, another species that only last year was defined as its own species. So there is a theme with all these animals that we're going through, and that is that we don't know much about them because a lot of them are only being known as their own species and taxonomically described very recently. So this was 2020. They love forest, they don't like cleared areas, and in Victoria, they're only in East Gippsland. They go into a little bit of New South Wales, and there's only less than 40 detection sites with only about 5 breeding sites. So we sometimes find these in forest coops, not that often, but we have found them in a few. Here's another species. This one was only described in 2009. It's from the Spiny Crayfish complex. So they're found in running streams. And there was one particular one known, the Orbos spiny crayfish, and it was thought that the spiny crayfish, which was endangered, was in all the catchments. And then around 10 years ago, a expert on crays came out and started realizing that there's actually different species of crayfish in the different catchments. So this one was found in a place called Brown Mountain on the Errinundra Plateau, and it is its own species that lives in the Bonang River. There's also another that's its own species at Swiss Creek, and another one in the Yami River. Yeah, so East Gippsland keeps delivering if we just let it. This last animal we've got a photo of here is the long-footed potteroo. This is on an old camera image. The tree that it's next to is around 11 meters around in circumference. It was in a scheduled logging coop, and this was taken from 2009 or something, or 2010 in the Yaumi forest, and it was the first camera footage of a long-footed potteroo in a coop that GECO got on camera. So the other things that we look for when we're looking through these areas scheduled for logging is the habitat structure. So as we noted from the owls and gliders, they need hollows and they need old forest. So we're often looking for big trees with hollows. So we look around for that type of forest in a coop and see if there's some way we can protect it. Now, the government says that they don't log old growth forest, special survey method where the hectares that they've looked at off their modelled old growth that they've decided is old growth. So they've basically redefined old growth out of existence. So this forest would not pass this tree here, trees that were selectively logged. So what of these old forests are still up for logging, despite the government saying we don't log old growth. They also say we don't log hollow bearing trees, but I'll show you what happens to them later. So this was just on the weekend. There is a prescription to not log trees. There's all these little prescriptions. They go on and on. They're difficult as well. There is one that says you can't log trees over about 8 meters in circumference. And so we were looking for trees of this size because they get missed when there's a coop with lots of them. And so here's some we found on the weekend in the Bonang area. A lot of these trees are over 10 meters. This tree was over, this is the tree Fiona was talking about, that was over 14.5 meters around. And this is people inside the tree. So it was quite big in there. You could fit a house. And I've just put this map up here. This is not that recent. This is from logging being grey. Can you see that? Yeah. The white bits are mostly park, and there has been more logging since. So when we talk about these forests, you can see there really isn't much of them. So this is logging history, clear fell logging history. So since 1970. So it's not before. So this is all your full industrial logging on this map, not just selective logging from 100 years ago. And so what I was saying before about hollow bearing trees can get protected if they can see the hollows in them. A lot of these trees are 60 meters tall. You don't know what's going on up there. But if a hollow's seen, it might be protected. But what happens is these trees are used to having trees around them, and when they're left like this, their roots are damaged and they get exposure and they die. So all these 3 photos are from different places across East Gippsland, and they all tell a similar story. And this next one, the last one I'll show you of these coops. Oh, I can't get there. It must have gone. There's something happening with my screen. Anyway, basically, that's just an outline on, oh, there it is. That's a coop that's been logged once. You know how it grows back? Well, that's quite a few years old, and you can see it all growing back there. That's blackberry. That's what happens in alpine higher areas. Anywhere above like 900 meters sort of doesn't grow back at all. So yeah, anyway, that's just an outline of the things we look for when we're looking in these areas that are scheduled to be logged, and a bit of background in what is actually saved when they say they don't log old growth and hollows. Thanks.
Thank you, Rena. You want to stop sharing?
Yes, I'll stop sharing this lovely Swiss Creek photo.
Cool. There was a couple of comments in the chat about whether or not whether we can get an injunction against that logging that's about to occur in December, and that's certainly something that we're going to be looking into. We do tend to try and get legal injunctions and that's how the logging actually got stopped up on Playground's track. But it's also a little bit like trench warfare, because there's so many coops and we're spending so long fighting them one by one, that there's some that are going to be left out of the court cases as well. And so that's what I'm now going to hand over to Isaac. So Isaac's been living in the area for about 18 months, 2 years, and is very instrumental in kicking off the Errinundra campaign. He also made the film that we're going to show in a sec. But before that, he's going to talk a little bit about Camp Errinundra, the survey camp that we just had over the weekend, and the scheduled logging. So over to you, Isaac.
Thanks, Fiona. Well, actually, I just wanted to talk a little bit first just about me and really what I'm doing here in Goongerah, and why I decided to go on a tree sit, because I had never climbed a tree before in my life, and you know, maybe you need to be a bit naive to do something like that. But as Fiona was saying, I've been in the area for about 18 months, and even I knew Goongerah before the fires. I wasn't here when the fires happened, and like many other people, because of coronavirus, I ended up in a place that I wasn't expecting to be, and that was Goongerah for me. And seeing and knowing Goongerah from before the fires and seeing it after, I mean, it caused me pain, and I had to deal with that. That grief and that sense of loss, and I still keep thinking about what the people that have lived here for decades must feel, right? Like there's the road that gets to Goongerah it's about 70 k's from Orbost, and it's like a really windy road that you really felt before the fires that you were getting deep into the forest, and that road now, like there's only from the 70s, and some of those areas are just a war that just kind of obliterated. Yeah, all right. That for me, like about all the people that and then seeing them lost in a matter of a day or two. So a few months after living here, they decided to start logging nearby in some forests that had been burned, but they were recovering in Mount Jersey. And then when we heard that they were going to log in unburnt forests in Errinundra, I just I just had to do something. And I decided that I wanted to go on a tree sit and try to highlight this issue. And mostly also because I didn't want to complain anymore about the things that I didn't agree with that were happening around me, and I wanted to do something about it. And once you live in a place that the people around you have been affected by it for such a long time, and then on top these massive scale bushfires, I just felt that I needed to do something. So that's how it all started. And it was just like just throwing a spear in the air and see what happened. And as you will see in the film, it it led to some great things. But for me also, it just provided like a very meaningful way to do something for something that I felt I needed to do. But the film is not about me. And firstly, the film talks about those bushfires and the impact that those bushfires had on the landscape, but also on the people, and the people that have been fighting this clear fell logging that's been happening for the last 60 years. That's changed the landscape in such a radical way, and that definitely that's been a contributing factor to the severity and scale of these on these bushfires. And then secondly as well is the film is also, it's testament that when people get together and to do something that they really believe in, like we actually have much more power than we give ourselves credit for. And it wasn't me going on a tree sit that stopped the logging 4.5 months later. It was the hundreds of people that came to camp, and also the people that show our support online, that donated to us, that the locals from the towns around that came and dropped some food or some cakes, muffins, or just like simple calls or messages of support. So I think that's for me, that was the most powerful thing, to feel that I was part of something bigger, and that actually that it had made an impact. And we know that was just, it's already gone. Like in these, I think the victories don't last too long, but having that experience, I think that give us the energy and the optimism that if we did it, we can do it again. And I think that that's one of the goals of today, is to encourage everyone to get involved in whatever way they want to be involved. But I think that probably it's time to watch this film, and then maybe we can talk a little bit more about what we can do. What do you think? 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 more about what's coming up and what's scheduled for.
All right, I think Ruben's going to try and share the video now. Isaac, you were breaking up a little bit at the end there, but we got the gist. Yeah, hopefully you'll find this inspiring and want to take action. And then after we show the video, it goes for about 8 or 9 minutes. We will come back and we will talk about what we can do together to try and, yeah, stop this logging from happening. So, Ruben, are you ready to go? No? Uh-oh. Looks like we're having a bit of a glitch here. Bear with us one tick. Ruben, we can just see your VLC without the actual video.
Sorry about that, everybody. That's unusual.
Maybe stop sharing and start again. It wouldn't be the internet without a few glitches, right? Hey. Goongerah lies at the base of Mount Ellery, which is the highest peak in the area, and the Errinundra Plateau is a short drive away. There used to be a timber mill in the 60s and it closed, and after that the alternative lifestylers moved in. There was a bunch of people that decided to stay and have their kids here and put their kids through the school.
Because it is remote, Goongerah is just a very, very, very small area in a big, vast sea of forest. In the last 50 years, that big, vast sea of forest has been almost completely logged. And that logging has been clear fell logging, which means all the trees get taken out even though they're not all used, and maybe 1 or 2 get left. There's hundreds of animals that use hollows in trees, and so it's only the old trees that create these. Removing that whole age class means that these animals can't use these trees that they depend on to survive, and so they are not in the area anymore, and we're just left with a young forest.
Bushfires didn't come through this valley, and that's because it was protected by the old growth forest and the rainforest that surrounds it. It's damp forest, it's wet forest, it's high altitude forest, and so there wasn't bushfires coming through here. But if you clear fell the entire surrounding bush and turn it into single age species and dry out the bush, then of course it's more flammable. So that, combined with climate change, means that this fire that came through in 2019, in one night it took out the entirety of the bush from basically just at the base of the plateau all the way down to the coast. Gone, destroyed, never to be replaced. Rainforest that is never going to recover. It's heartbreaking. The only thing, the saving grace The only thing that got us through was the Errinundra Plateau.
The plateau's important because it has areas that are unchanged for thousands and thousands of years. It acts as like a refuge in climate for cold-adapted species in Victoria. It's got the largest area of cool temperate rainforest on mainland Australia.
What happens? A couple of months later, they decide to start logging it. I just was activated again in a way that I haven't been for a long time, because I just couldn't believe that they were going to destroy this tiny bit that didn't burn. We've all just had enough. We've just had enough of this crap. We're not going to sit here and watch them take the Errinundra Plateau, the only tiny patch that's not burned, down the bloody road on the back of trucks. Not going to happen. The difference this time is that after having experienced that fire and seeing what's happened to the whole landscape all the way down to the coast, people are now supportive because they realise that we have to do direct action if we're going to stop this.
We know that logging is contributing to climate change and temperature rise and increased severity and length of fire seasons.
People that were traditionally opposed to environmental action are coming up and supporting us, and I think having Orbost, Bairnsdale and Bendock and Bonang locals come and support us is a real positive that the Errinundra campaign has.
This area is going to be logged, but we have a camp which will help us and save the forest.
I never believed I could. I thought the climbing was crazy. But yeah, we just hung around and did climb training on smaller trees, and then ended up coming out to a blockade after hearing about how significant and seeing how significant the forest was.
It's been so fun here. Spent the night up in the tree, which was really amazing.
And like all those animals, that this became the refuge when the bushfires raged, our ancestors ran and found refuge here, and Bidwell mob took on a lot of other mob. And we wouldn't be alive today without those ancestors surviving. And they walked here, these footsteps, and they need us to keep this alive. That this will always be our refuge.
We encourage everyone to get out here and put their bodies on the line and protect what we have left.
I should not still have to be walking through clearfields. We should not still have to be protesting this stuff.
Native forest logging, it has to stop now, today. We've had enough. The forest is ruined. It needs to recover.
There's a plan for 2030 to end up native timber logging, and the bushfires, we think, change everything, and what the Andrews government should do is just bring forward that plan.
Protecting our native forests should be part of our plan to tackle climate change.
And the reason why people raft down the Franklin today is from direct action. The reason why many national parks exist across Australia is from direct action, including the Errinundra, including parts of the Snowy.
We actually had a win in that one of the logging coops that contained old growth forest was taken off the logging schedule, and another couple were temporarily put on hold due to a court case run by Environment East Gippsland.
nature is hard to find these days. People don't get enough of it. So beautiful old trees, lots of birds, clean water.
We know that there's over 3,000 hectares of forest that hasn't been burnt but is scheduled for logging, and we want to give a strong message to the government that if they try to take a single tree out of there, we will be there trying to stop them. Alrighty, thanks heaps for that. Isaac, did you want to, got some nice comments in there about the film, which is really great. And yeah, lots of comments about what arseholes big forests are. So I noticed there was someone put their hand up during that film. If you want to chuck your questions in the chat, we can get to them. But before that, I think, Isaac, you were going to talk about what's scheduled in the coming summer. We've just looked at the timber release plan and the logging schedule for the next couple of months, and it's not great news for some of the logging areas up on the plateau. And yet we are totally, just in terms of the movie, we're going to be passing on the link in the chat, and we really encourage you to share it, look at it 1,000 times, get it out there. But Isaac, do you want to talk about what's coming up this summer?
Well, no, hopefully there's no logging coming up this summer, but I think what they've done is they've not only kept what was there last summer, but they've added new areas in the unburnt in Errinundra and other places in East Gippsland as well. And there's been surveying done by Delp already that indicates that there's logging happening in the next few months, and we know that there's already tentative dates for this month that starts tomorrow, from October till December up in the plateau. The last weekend we had just a regional camp, citizen science camp up here in Goongerah, and we went and surveyed some of those areas. And that's Rena shared a few of those images of those 14 meter trees and heaps of old trees. There's some of the areas that had no logging history in there when we surveyed them. And in particular, there's one in Sellers Road that it's just such a majestic forest that we've decided to type it up, and we're soon gonna make it. We're gonna put out the information for people to do self-guided walks on that forest, because it's worth seeing. And I think one of the main issues when people don't quite understand with what's happening with native timber logging is that people don't really know what type of forests we're still logging in Victoria. The government keeps saying that we don't log old growth, but if anyone goes and sees one of those forests, they immediately will see the value of that forest standing. And there's no way you can regrow a forest like that when you've logged it. Yeah, that's one of the things that that you can do to get involved, is just come out here and just check these magnificent forests before it's too late. But hopefully we'll be there to stop them like we did last summer. And I think now Fiona will share as well a few other ways that you can get involved.
Yeah, thanks, Isaac. Yeah, so we are really keen to have, I can see in the chat that there's a bunch of people that are feeling inspired, which is awesome. Of course, Chris is going to send in the chat a little document that we've prepared earlier. Here's something we prepared earlier on how you can get involved. So as well as direct action, which we are really keen on this summer, of course, there's a bunch of people that are stuck in the cities at the moment because of COVID, but that doesn't mean that you can't do things. The first thing that we want to promote is that there's going to be some online and non-violent direct action training that our mates in the Central Highlands are organising. And so non-violent direct action is basically physical resistance to the destruction of our forest. So it's peaceful, it's non-violent, it doesn't involve destruction of property, but it's very effective in getting results, particularly in conjunction with lobbying and media and other things. So there's going to be 2 online sessions, and you'll be learning things like the different roles for ground crew and support roles, you know, making a safe place and community safety and community care, plus decision making and legal training. It's free and it's online, and the 2 dates, if you've got your diary out there, grab a pen, is the 19th of October on Tuesday between 6 and 8, and then Thursday the 21st of October between 6 and 8 p.m, both via the internet. So it's a really good idea to get those skills up before you come out. Then hopefully if things become less restrictive, people from the city will be able to come out to the forest. But if you're in a regional area of Victoria and you're able to come out, like Isaac said, we held quite a successful citizen science camp last weekend just with regional Victorians. And of all of the logging coops that are scheduled, as Isaac mentioned, there's a bunch that have been added on. And we need to get to those areas, and we need to take photos of those areas and measure those trees and try and get a campaign going for some of these areas before the state election. So the state election's coming up in November next year, which gives us just over 12 months to really get our shit together and try and make forests an issue for the Andrews government. We also have a federal election coming up, who knows when, potentially, well, could be next week for all we know, but you never know. There could be something there that we can do federally as well, particularly around the endangered species protections. We know that talking to politicians is really important. Whenever we speak to politicians, personal stories really makes an impact. It doesn't have, you don't always necessarily need to have all of the facts and figures, but in case you want to come armed, a lot of the information that Chris is sharing has some tips on what to do when you're speaking to pollies. You can ring them on the phone, you can send them an email, you can try and visit them. We're finding it's quite easy to get access to local MPs at the moment because everything's via Zoom, and so their schedule's easier. So it's really important to speak to your local member wherever you are and try and tell them that forest is important to you, whether they're from whichever party. They need to know that it's going to be an issue for them come the state election, and in conjunction with climate change and climate action. They can't be paying lip service to climate action while clear felling the forests. So it's really important to make that clear to them as well. And we know, because of what's happened in Western Australia, just recently, that they had a win. And so that was pretty much out of the blue, but it was a result of a long-term campaign by West Australian Forest Alliance, which has been doing direct action and media and lobbying for a long, long time. We're also hoping to be able to do some more city actions, so and raise awareness. We had some great solidarity tree sit in Melbourne over the Errinundra campaign as well. Now, if all of that sounds too much and too intimidating, or you don't have the time or whatever, the best thing to do is share that video on your socials, talk to your friends and family. Conversations down the street is also a really good way to let people know what's going on. You can like, follow and share our accounts. So we have the GECO Facebook account, GECO Twitter and GECO Instagram. We also have a Save Errinundra Instagram and Twitter account, which is just for the direct action stuff. And yeah, you can donate money to GECO and keep Chris employed if you feel like that. Always really important. We're pretty much volunteer run, but all of our donations go towards keeping a campaigner on the ground. So it's really, really important to do that too. That's probably enough. I think you can see in the chat that there's the document there to download, and that's also up on our website. Chris, I think has the film been put up yet? Is that?
Yeah.
Can we share the link to the film as well in the chat, or Chris will email it around later maybe? Yeah, so now we're going to open it up to Q&A. We've got about just under 10 minutes left for any questions, or comments, or whatever you feel. Yeah, you can go for it. I can see now. Do we want to? Here we go. Thanks, John. I can see that John, he was one of the key people at the Goongerah campaign, is in the chat saying his direct action day's over. What do you mean? It's never over. You're never too old, John. You can always lock on. Yeah, put on the chat or put the cam. It's good. We can potentially open up the unmuting option. What do you think? Should we do that?
Someone asked, is the Errinundra Plateau at the Errinundra National Park? Trying to find it on Google Maps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the Errinundra National Park contains some of the Errinundra Plateau, but you'll see when you look on the map that it's basically a donut. And so the shape of it is really weird, and all of the bits that are missing is being logged. So I don't know, Rena, maybe you could share that map again and have a look.
Yep.
Someone's asked about old growth and how the definition has been declassified. Is someone able to speak it to that? Rena, can you talk about the definition?
Yeah. I just have to unmute. Yep, sorry, I just had to unmute.
Oh no, don't unmute because you're going through Isaac's laptop. Otherwise you'll get feedback.
Okay. All right. Yeah, so there was never a proper legal definition of old growth. There was a definition that the department that used to go by that had flaws, but it basically talked about a forest with senescing trees. I think the main disagreement we had with it was the negligibly disturbed bit wasn't defined. And that was the Woodgate definition. So basically when the government have maps of where they believe modelled old growth to be, and a lot of it is done aerially. And so it's a bit secretive. So a lot of the DELP surveys they're doing in Coops, they're on the internet. You can go and look at the results. They have a page and they show you what they've found. They don't show you what they're going to do with the forest, but they'll show you the threatened species, what they've found, and the surveys that they've done. The old growth is not on there. And so when the announcement happened, they said, we're going to save 100,000 hectares across the state of old growth forest. They actually said old growth forest, not just any forest. They're not just talking about forest for a particular species or forest for continuation. They were talking about old growth forest. So we thought, oh yeah, that's great. That should cover most of it. But, and we also thought it was going on their modelled old growth maps, which would be changing a lot now from fire. And there wasn't really, they were getting smaller, like the old growth map from 2009 is different to their old growth map from 2003. And so you get these differences in them. Some are very questionable. Some are because of certain reasons that they're destroyed or whatever. But anyway, so that's what people thought, oh, they're just going to save that mapped old growth. But what they decided to do is Vic Forest made a tool. It was called the Old Growth Tool, and it was made by Vic Forest. So the department was like, oh, we can't really use it if it's just made by Vic Forest. So a few uni people in from the forestry department tweaked it a little bit, but it was basically Vic Forest's tool, and DELP get contractors to go out into forests and use this tool to see if it's old growth or not. And none of this is on the internet, but it sort of has come out, and there is a court case from Flora and Fauna Research Collective have actually taken this whole process of the tool and the use of it to court. And it's waiting for a judgment on if they can even use this. That judgment's been waiting on for a long time. Before the judgment and after, they've been using this tool. And we don't know anything about what's going on because, like, other than that they're using it and they've hardly found any old growth from it. And that's all we know. I suppose, yeah, you can tell because some things come up occasionally as old growth. Chris might know more about this. On the website, it will come up as a bit of old growth in the coop, and there's only a couple of hectares. So from all these hectares, this is how much has come up. So there's obviously flaws, and I suppose that's what I mean about defining it out of existence. There isn't actually a legal definition for it. So that sort of is a bit of a problem in itself. Yeah, anyway, I think I kind of answered the question. I'm not really sure. Sorry for going on a tangent.
There's a couple of questions there about the certification. So Vic Forest tried to get certification a few years ago and more recently and fails every time because of their absolutely terrible logging practices. So they have not managed to get forest stewardship certification, which is the most kind of credible certification. The other one is a timber industry one. There's also a question there about what's left at Goongerah. We don't know. We haven't been there, but it doesn't look great from the maps. The bridges are still out from back in the day. There's a question here about when the next camp is. We're hoping to do, we usually do them on the long weekends. Restrictions will obviously, you know, we'll play that by ear. But there are people out in Goongerah all the time that are up for stuff. So just get in contact with Chris via the GECO email and we can work that stuff out. The GECO email is geco@geco.org.au, GECO. Yeah, so thanks, Chris. She's just popped it into the chat. There was another question about solidarity actions, and I think it's a really great idea for the people that are in the city. You don't need to just come out to the forest to do direct action. Being in the city means that we've got better access to the politicians and the decision makers. And although it's really important to be doing that kind of peaceful resistance in the forest, it's also really important to be letting the politicians know that this is an issue. So very, very into hearing about people's ideas, particularly in the lead up to the state election. If you aren't already on the GECO email list, make sure you subscribe and we will work together on how we can actually do actions in the city and yeah, particularly in the next few months. Where does the East Gippsland wood go? Yes, Eden mainly. There's a massive big chip mill, 100% owned by multinational company overseas, and it mainly goes out there. We've got some really full-on aerial photos of the pile of logs and wood chips that are sitting there at the dock, so that's pretty full-on. It definitely hasn't slowed down over COVID. In fact, for some reason, I don't know why construction, forestry and mining appears to be all essential services. Maybe some of you might have some ideas about that, but that means it goes unabated all through COVID, apart from the more recent 2-week lockdown in Melbourne for construction. I think that's about it for the questions. Thanks so much for all of the amazing comments and support of people in the chat, and I recognise so many faces of people that have come out before, and it's so great to see you all. We're a small group of people and we really need everyone to be working together on this stuff. We've been saying for years there's not much left, but there really isn't much left now after the fires and the destruction of that forest. So there's tiny little patches of green amongst the brown, and they're the bits that we're going to be focusing on. They're ramping it up. There's absolutely no way they're slowing down before 2030, and we're calling on them to phase out the industry well before the 2030 deadline that they've already announced. So if you want to get involved, yeah, get online and chuck us an email and we will keep you posted. Definitely go to the NVDA training and share the video. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, folks.
Awesome. All right.
It's just nice staying and reading all the nice comments.
Yeah, it is. We'll share the chat too. We'll save the chat and share it.
Yeah.
See you later.
Oh, John. See ya.
Yeah, it was great to see everyone again.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yep, I'll be in touch.
Great.
See you later. Bye.
Bye. All right, I reckon we might close the meeting now. Thanks again to everybody for coming along. We really appreciate it. And yeah, see you online and in person shortly.